My name is Max Banfield. Welcome to my talk. Before I start, it's important for you to know that I am the inventor of the modern method for treating chronic fatigue syndrome, which other people call PACING. But I did not tell any person in my groups that they had to exercise. So sit back and relax and find out what actually happened, because a lot of people will tell you different things. When I was about in my early 20s, I was becoming extremely ill. And that's where I'll start. Then I'll tell you why I joined the Fitness Research Institute. And then I'll tell you what they made me do, which was so bad. And then I'll tell you why I had to fix it and how I had to fix the method of training. And then I'll tell you what's happened since and why people are changing labels and claiming that they developed this method. And then maybe you have a better idea what's really going on here. So you don't have to exercise. What happened in the 1970s, I was extremely ill. Doctors would send me for x-rays, nothing showed. So they didn't know what was wrong. When I asked them, they just go, shrug their shoulders like that. That's my doctor. I was sent to a psychiatrist who said the pain's caused by my mind and not my body. And I thought, what a load of nonsense. And so ultimately, I decided I have to study medicine myself. And that's what I did, roughly the age of 25. I thought, I'm going to have to devote my life to this because I'm only a normal bloke. And these people who can't solve the problem have got these wrong ideas. They've been around for centuries. So it's not going to be easy. Well, about a year later, I heard someone on the radio saying there's a Fitness Research Institute in Adelaide and they do exercise programs under medical supervision. So what was my position there? Well, like every other person, I thought if a doctor can't solve the problem and if a specialist can't solve the problem, maybe researchers can. Maybe they know more. And maybe, I can contribute to the improvement in the knowledge of this. So I enrolled in that institute. So that's where it all began. I was extremely exhausted. I had breathing problems. I felt faint. I was dizzy. And I was getting worse. That's where the start was. Okay? Now, I will now move on to tell you what happened when I went to that research institute. The name of it was the South Australian Institute for Fitness Research and Training. And it was in a two-storey building, reasonably large property. Across the road was an oval, the University Oval, and across from that was the Adelaide University. They were associated organisations. When I arrived, I went to a receptionist who took down names and address and details, and I then went into a laboratory. Now, in this laboratory, they had an ergonomic cycle, and that's it's like a bicycle with the back wheel removed. They've still got the seat to sit on. There's a wheel in front and some handlebars. And there were two laboratory assistants, and they get some wires which were attached to a cardiograph and other instruments. And they place a suction cup on one breast, then the other side of my chest, and then they would attach the similar suction cups to my wrists and my ankles and so forth. And the person who was on the cardiographic machine was one of Australia's top research cardiologists. So the next thing that happened was they said, we now want you to pedal on this cycle. So they can measure everything that's going on, including my heart rate and function. And the first time, there was no pressure on the brake. And I had to pedal for a couple of minutes while they did their measurements. And while I'm pedaling, they said, you've got to go faster and faster and faster. And I thought, as a former instructor in gymnastics myself, that's ridiculous. These symptoms are terrible. My heart was pounding. And it was nothing like normal exercise in the normal gym. I was very ill. And then they said, you can stop now. They then applied some pressure to the brake with a calibrated measurement to the brake. And they said, now we want you to pedal for another couple of minutes. So I did, and they kept saying faster and faster and faster. Because this made everything worse. And I thought, there's something wrong with the way these guys are doing things. This is terrible. I don't think any other patient anywhere would do this. But I persevered. Then they said you could rest. And then a minute or two went by, and then they said I could start pedaling again. But they put higher pressure on the brake. And then I continued to pedal. And of course, everything got worse. And I said, are you sure you know what you're doing? They said, yes. Well, they didn't. But I had to go through that about 5 levels. They said, you can stop now. And I thought, good, I'm going to go home and get out of this hellhole, and I'm not coming back. This is ridiculous. Researchers, they're not researchers, bootlaces. So what I did was I went home, and in the meantime, they made some measurements and calculations of my aerobic capacity, which they call physical working capacity. And when I was home, I thought, if I stop home and do nothing, my health, it had stabilised actually, but it was pretty bad, and it's not getting better, is more the point. Am I going to be like this the rest of my life or not? I can't see no form of medication is helping, no form of other form of treating is helping. So the only hope I've ever got of solving this problem is to go back to that institute and basically tell the staff there, get lost, just give me the data. I wanted the measurements so that I could develop my own exercise program. And you need to understand that I'd been given scholarships to study leadership in gymnastics only a few years earlier. So that's the sort of thing you'd expect. You wouldn't expect somebody with leadership training to say yes or no, sir, 3 bags full, sir, or do something, even if it's a bit strange. So I'd had enough initiative to do that. Now, in the first half hour of training, it was twice a week, about an hour to 1 to 2 hours a week per session, twice a week. I'd go down to that building, and there were several buildings where I went to. One was in the city, one was at Paynham, and one was at McGill Teachers College. And it'd be typically this: the first 15 minutes, they'd tell you to do exercises like arms out, arms up, arms down. That was relatively easy. And then they'd say, we want you to bend down and touch your toes. For me, that was difficult because that requires a lot more energy. And then they said, we want you to do push-ups. And this is how I did it. While the instructor is saying things like this: 1, 2, 3, and everyone else is doing 1 push-up, 2 push-up, 3. I'm trying to make it look like I'm doing push-ups. I couldn't even do half a push-up. It was causing me a lot of problems. So I managed to get past that just by not actually doing those exercises. So there's a mixture of exercise. Some were just arm movements, which I could do, and those which require energy were causing me a lot of problems. We were then taken out onto the oval, and I know I can't run fast anymore. I used to be a gymnast. Running fast for 2 hours in a game of sport was easy, but here I couldn't even do anything. So there were about 50 people lined up, ready to start the 400-yard laps of this oval. And so I manoeuvred myself to the front inconspicuously. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to keep up with anybody. And as they take off, I'll try and keep up. And if I can't, I'll gradually drop back. I was in the first or second row, and there's about 10 rows of people. Nobody will notice that I'm dropping back. And that's exactly what happened. They kept running and running and running, and more and more and more people got past me. And there's a instructor on the side of the oval looking at me say, "Run fast and catch up with the other people, it won't do you any harm." And I looked at him like this, "Oh, you bloody twit. Young puppy telling me to run fast." And I thought, it's ridiculous. That was impossible. So everyone passed me. And to give you an example, one guy, I was about 26, right? One guy that ran past me was 40, overweight and asthmatic and shy. And as he went past, he slowed down. And he's because he, thought it's not fair for me to be behind. And he'll keep me company. And I said, "Look, mate, I really do appreciate your sentiment, but you're here to get fit too, so go ahead. I'll get there somehow." And so he just went ahead. That's how bad I was. 40-year-old overweight asthmatic can go ahead. And everyone else by then was about 200 yards ahead of me. Well, this is how I would run. I'll just demonstrate. I'm not going into any details. I don't want the copyright thieves to know too much. They're making themselves out to be heroes now who did all this. They did nothing. I would walk along, be running like this, and then I'd gasp for breath. I was suffocating, right? Really badly. This is called air hunger, right? And so every 10 to 20 yards, I'd have You're looking at me now and you're thinking, "Oh, it's not that bad." Well, you haven't had the problem. It was bad. And I don't think anyone would believe me when I tell you how bad it was. But I was gasping for breath and not getting enough breath. So I couldn't just go and get breath. I go, still haven't got enough. Still haven't got. I was practically suffocating every 10 or 20 yards. So after about 100 or so yards, I'd slow down and I'd sort of walk like I'm jogging. I couldn't jog. And I'd gasp for breath less often. And then I sort of recover a bit. So I'd step up my pace and and I'm here to tell you that is not normal. It's not the normal experience of sprinting in exercise. It's not the normal response to sprinting in football, lacrosse or anything like that. It's not the normal response to doing 10 somersaults in the gym in 2 minutes. It's quite abnormal. And I had a lot of clowns telling me it's normal, think positive and you get over it. I had to put up with that silly nonsense for a long time. But fortunately, nobody bothered me after that. so I could keep going. Now, I got around about 3/4 of the way around the first lap. And this is what happened next. The others had already done one full lap and another 3/4 of the lap, and they're overtaking me. And there were two men who came past, and they would have been in their 50s. And they were saying to each other as they went past me, "Look at that lazy bastard. He's just lazy. That's why he's so lazy he can't even run." And they said, "We've got an excuse. We're 50 and we've been smoking for 30 years. I had to put up with that type of nonsense. I had something wrong with my health and nobody knew what it was. Doctors, we can't find anything wrong. Psychiatrists saw it in the mind. It had nothing to do with anything like that. I was just exhausted. I wanted to know why. So they'd all go past me, and about another 4 or 5 minutes later, I get to the end of the 400 yards and walk back into the hall. And then everyone else had packed up and gone back home. I was the only one left. And so I did the same and I went home. So that was my first experience. Research Institute, Medical Research Institute, telling me I had to run fast. It was just absurd. So now maybe you know, and maybe you'll listen, because I had to change the way they were doing things. And that's what I'll discuss next. What I did that no one else in the world has ever done before. And then I'm going to say why people and how people copy my methods. Okay, so remember, if you're a chronic TB patient, I didn't tell anyone else they had to exercise because I knew what the problems were. So I'll be back and I'll talk about what I did next. That was the first day. I'll now tell you what happened in the next 12 months. Essentially, I started off training twice a week for 1 to 2 hours in that similar manner. And eventually, I was training 7 days a week, about 3 times at the Research Institute, and the remaining 4 days around school ovals or local ovals, and my own way, and at my own pace, hence the word pacing. So a number of things happened. I would arrive and do the 15 minutes of exercise, and I didn't do much of that. I'm not going into any details. And then we'd do the jogging, and I'd have the same trouble all the time. After a few years, I'd have to gasp for breath. If I ran fast, my heart would pound. And as a former gymnast, that was quite abnormal. It's not even remotely close to normal. But I had to persevere. And I would reach levels of fitness that seemed to be improving. And this was indicated by one of the early tests 3 months later, that I had actually improved my health dramatically. And then one day, we had, on a regular basis, other sporting activities. One of the things I was good at was volleyball, but I didn't move very far. I stayed on the spot. Wherever the ball came in my direction, I'd hit it back, and I became quite accurate at doing that. And another one was relays. And there would have been 50 people there, and let's say there were 5 teams of 10. And you all lined up in a row, and I was in probably row 4. and we had to run towards the end of the hall and back. And then we'd have to hop to the end of the hall and back. And then we'd have to hop backwards and back. And then we'd have to do various activities running towards the end of the hall and back, probably a distance of 20 yards. And it's a race. So there's a lot of pressure on everyone to win. And I used to be in gymnastics and I used to organise relays. So I know all about relays. I wasn't in them, I organised them. And here I am in a relay. And I thought, it's impossible for me to keep up with anyone. Impossible. So I would hop and make it look like I was hopping. I was actually using both feet. And I'd do the same thing backwards. And I would try, whenever I took off and came back, my team would lose about 10 yards. And it's only 20 yards sprint. Because I simply couldn't do it. But on one occasion, I overdid it and I collapsed on the ground. I didn't lose consciousness, but I was gasping for breath. It's like I was suffocating continuously for about 10 minutes. And everyone crowded around me, thinking that I'd had some sort of heart attack or something. It wasn't a heart attack. Probably worse in terms of the effect it had on me. But I just told them to get away because it was a waste of time helping. They just couldn't do anything. Just get out of my way and let me crawl around. And I crawled around on the floor. And when they cleared away from me, and they all meant well, they all were trying to help. They all thought I was in a lot of trouble, and I was, but what's the use of getting help from people who are bloody useless? No use to anyone. So I crawled towards the end of the hall, and I'm gasping continuously. And I'm crawling along the end of the hall, and then I had to crawl to the edge of the hall and then crawl in another direction. And it was extremely difficult. It's like trying to walk when you're suffocating. And I got to a chair and I tried to crawl up to the chair and sit down. As soon as I got up to the chair, I was gasping for breath and I couldn't stay there. I had to fall down to the floor again and walk around, crawl around like this. And then I crawled up to the chair and collapsed again. I couldn't stay there. I was too exhausted to stay in the chair. Until the third time, I stayed there. Meanwhile, about 15 minutes had gone by. So then I thought, I've got to get out of this hellhole. Nobody there knew anything about what's happening to me. And it's a research institute. They knew nothing of any value to me. So I crawled out, I walked out, staggered to my car and drove home. And I thought, that's the last time I do anything like that. So that was in about probably the 5th month. I thought, when I got home, I thought, I'm never going to do that again. If I do anything about my pace, not what other people tell me to do or what other people think I should do. That's why the copyright thieves now call that pacing. Do everything at your own pace, not what someone else tells you to do. What I did was I thought, I'll never do that again. It'll always be at my own pace. And I went home and I was completely exhausted for a week. So I described that. You know what they now call that? The people who were telling me to run fast want you to think they invented the concept of post-exertion malaise. No, they didn't even know. They didn't even check. they send these patients to mental hospitals. They didn't check the effects of exercise. On the day they said the reason they're reacting this way is fear of exercise. They tell me that I was a gymnast. Get out of here. And then afterwards, they didn't bother to check the next day. They just said, oh, they're weak. They're just afraid. They're scared. For a week after, and I thought, what a load of bloody baloney. I wasn't scared of anything. I'm not going to go through that again. Simple fact. But that period of a week, I didn't really recover properly anyway. And that was a week. And that's what people now call post-exertional malaise. They didn't know, and they still wouldn't know if I didn't document all this. Well, then I went back and I kept training because I thought if I don't sort this problem out, no one else knows what to do. The doctor didn't know, the specialist didn't know, and the world experts didn't know. I thought there must be a lot of people with this problem and nobody knows what's going on here. I'll keep going. So I slowed down. I just ran I still had a lot of problems, but I wasn't confused about what's going on anymore. I knew what was going on. And I knew how to manage all those symptoms. And then one day, I was playing volleyball. And as I said, I wasn't running around playing volleyball like you see in a volleyball team. I was just standing there. And if the ball came near me, I go, tap, pretty accurately beating the player on the other side of the net. I wasn't running around. I was just down there, tap, like that. Everyone else was running around. I said, gee, he's a good volleyball player. He just stands there. Well, that's because I couldn't run. I've played a lot of sport in my life, and I knew about how to deal with volleyball in different situations. I've been in situations like that plenty of times before. And then one day, I turned around to get the ball like this. And I turned that way, and my thigh bone went that way, my leg bone didn't. Now, nobody knew why, but I was walking around like a cripple for 3 years after that. I had to leave the institute. I injured my knee cartilage. And in those days, docs couldn't diagnose it for 3 years. And then I had surgery. Now, that is another story. But at that instance, I injured my knee. I couldn't do anything because of my leg after that. So I couldn't even go back to the institute. Now, for the next 3 years, probably 4 years, I thought, I can't exercise. What else can I do to improve my health? And what I did then was I made adjustments to my lifestyle. About how long I slept, how long I did something, how much time I had in between things. I didn't get up at 9 and do something for, 5 or 6 hours. I had to stop and rest and stop and rest. Now, I'm not going to go into details because guess who's out there wanting to make money out of this? The people who treat patients. And they're going to tell me, go jump in the lake. But I had to adjust my lifestyle in very precise ways that had never been thought of and never been done before. So, but that's what I did. I worked out how to adjust my lifestyle. And now people refer to that because what happens if I didn't? I'd end up totally and severely exhausted again. And I said, why is this happening? It took me 3 years to figure out why that was happening before I could stop it from happening. 3 years. No wonder no one else could figure it out. They weren't even looking. They said it's anxiety. They said people like this worried 24 hours a day. I thought, what a load of baloney. And nothing to do with anxiety. It was happening. And I worked out how to stop it. And the people who now use that method to derive a fee, call it booms and busts, right? You do things for a few weeks or months, and then all of a sudden you have what they call a crash. And guess where they got that idea from? Me. Guess where the world's top researcher got that idea from? Me. So, 3 of the features of chronic fatigue syndrome: the abnormal response to exercise, the idea that you do pacing to prevent it, and the idea that you adjust your lifestyle to prevent, to deal with this issue of booms and busts where you're healthy for a few weeks and then you crash. And they're the 3 major methods of treating chronic fatigue syndrome today. But I've done more than that. Guess what? Nobody else has. Because they didn't do all the research and the inventing. So the next thing that happened, after the 4th year, I started to be able to stabilise my health. So I could walk around without gasping for breath. I could do exercise without collapsing. I could lead a reasonable lifestyle by managing things. And then one day I met a friend of mine who told me about the head of that research institute and then introduced me to him through a phone call. So I'll tell you about what I said to the head of that research institute and why he put me in charge of 2 research cardiologists and 60 other patients next. So stay watching. Now, probably 3 or 4 years went by, as I said, and one day I was walking down North Terrace in Adelaide and I saw this guy coming towards me in the distance with a guide dog, and it looked like a friend of mine. Clive Fielding, it turned out to be true, it was him. And I'd studied group work under scholarship, leadership in gymnastics, a few years earlier. And I said, "How you going, Clive?" And he said, "He's doing great." I did 4 years of study because that's all I was interested in, part-time. He went on to become a psychologist. And I said, "What's he doing?" And he told me. And he said, "What am I doing?" I said, "I don't want to tell you." He said, "Why not?" And I said, "Because it's a bit of a few issues involved." He said, "What's the issues?" "Look, I've just proven a lot of psychiatric theories a load of bunkum." He said, "That doesn't matter." I said, "It doesn't?" He said, "Nah. What's the problem?" I said, "Well, there's all these people who think that fatigue is due to anxiety, and there's probably an element of truth in it, but the major problem is quite different. And I've developed a method of treating the problem, and I don't know how to contact the best researchers in the world to tell them, and I don't think they'll believe me anyway. And there's a lot of people who need help." And he said, "Well, he knows the head of the research institute where I trained. He's Tony Sedgwick." He said he meets him every month in a local Lions Club in King William Street, one of the hotels there. And I said, "I don't want to talk to some toffee-nosed snot who's going to say, oh, he's a tosser and I'm just a fool." He said, no, he's a nice guy." He said, come to the club and I'll introduce him." And I didn't go. It's because of my poor health. I wouldn't be able to do it at that stage. Now I can go anywhere I want. But then in those days I was still quite ill. And so what I did was, I said, "I'm not going to." He said, "Look, what you've got to do, phone him up. Go meet him. He said, he's a nice guy." So I went home and I thought, a few days later, I thought, oh, damn it, I'm not going to get anywhere if I don't. So I rang him up and arranged a meeting. Now, this is what happened when I met him. The first thing that what happened was I arrived at the Institute and there's a four-wheel drive there with canoes on top and mud all over the place. And I thought, I know, whoever owns that car is my kind of guy, because that's what I used to do, that sort of thing. I was a physical fitness type of guy, and so this is a physical fitness research institute. And I went up and it turned out it was his car. And I spoke to the secretary and he said, yes, the meeting will start in 5 minutes. And I thought I'd go into a panel of 12 people. I actually only met one man, Tony, the head of the institute. And I explained what I did. I said, this disorder that I'm talking about is considered to be a mental illness, and it isn't. And I've developed a method of treating it based roughly on exercise. Now, if you've got chronic fatigue, don't worry about it. You don't have to exercise. There's more than one way to skin a cat. But you need to understand certain things. So I said, I reckon I can get people to train. And he said, that's interesting. And I thought, well, that's good, he's interested. And I said, the world's best researchers go and get people to train for 12 weeks. And they've been studying it for 50 years. He said, I know. I said, well, I've just trained for almost a year. Have a look at my records. I've got about 10,000 people going through his institute, and I'm one of them. He got out the records, yes. He said, you can do it. There's no doubt about it. And then he became real keen on getting me to do something that no one else had ever done. And he realised straight away that his researchers have been doing everything wrong. They've been doing almost the opposite of what they should have been doing. And this is happening all around the world. And so he said, so I want you to get your 2 research cardiologists to run a program for patients with fatigue and confirm what I'm saying. And then just, pay me royalties if it becomes popular and is used by everybody. Well, he said he'll have a talk to his research cardiologist. And so I went home. And 2 weeks later I rang him back and I said, how did they go? He said, they're not interested. I thought, well, of course they're not. One's 50, the other one's 40. They're highly qualified and I'm an ordinary bloke. No, they don't want to work for me. And plus, they thought it's impossible to get patients to train. It's a waste of their time. They were treating patients in groups of asthma, heart disease, diabetes, obesity and smoking. They didn't want to run another group, which they didn't think would succeed anyway, with me in charge of the design. So I said, bad luck, Tony. I'll have to try something else. He said, why don't you take charge? I said, how can I do that? Who's going to take orders from me? How can I organise this? He said, you've got group work qualifications, haven't you? And I said, yeah. He said, we'll organise a group of doctors. And then it's not just you doing the research. It's a medically qualified team. But how do I recruit doctors? I'm only me. Who's going to join the team? He said he will get the 2 research cardiologists on board. And he introduced me to Professor Timmerell, who's the head of Adelaide University Medical School. He can tell you where to recruit from the medical profession who like doing research. So I thought, all right, I'll do that. And so within due course, I had a team of about 6, probably 7, maybe a couple of other people involved to get this done. And one of them was a newspaper journalist, Diane Beer, from the newspaper. And she wouldn't talk to me when I was just me. I said, well, if you don't believe me, why don't you ring the head of the institute and find out? And when she found out that I was the guy in charge, she'd started writing newspaper articles. So that's how we recruited patients to the course. There are several other methods. We had 60 people making inquiries, and only 24 actually came to be tested. And then only about 10 of them trained for any length of time. And some of them trained for almost a year before I left the institute. Okay, and what I did was I said, see, they're doing it my way and it works. Nobody else had succeeded ever before. And I said, Tony, this could become worldwide. And you can use it, this method, in exchange for royalties, if it becomes widely accepted. Right? And so you can just experiment with this method. I ran it through about twice and left them with some guidelines. And if he tried it and it just filtered out to nothing, I wouldn't expect him to pay me anything. But if he started using it and charging fees, all he had to do is pay me 5% and I'd have an income. And if everyone in the world did it, I'd have a very good income. But a few years after, I found out that he'd got the whole institute, everyone, smokers, asthmatics, heart disease patients, etc., on my trajectory of pacing to replace the forced exercise to get fit programs. I completely replaced his whole institute's business. And then he went interstate and started selling my ideas without telling me anyone my name, and he started teaching my ideas at various universities in South Australia. And other people come along, and it's now worldwide. Nobody knows I exist. Nobody pays me. Well, they should be, because without me, that method wouldn't be existing. I proved it had nothing to do with the fear of exercise. I developed the concept of running at your own pace instead of running faster and faster and faster to get fit. And I developed the concept that if you overdo it, you're going to have very serious problems with exercise and lifestyle. And that's what other people call pacing, post-exertion malaise, booms and busts, and the other aspects of it. I developed that, and no one has added anything to that method since, of any value, except me. And I don't publish anymore. Why? So that other people can get rich, so that other people can get ruddy knighthoods. If you think that I should, think again. I don't think those people are being reasonable with me, and I don't think anyone should think that should be happening. So I will end it there.